Welcome. I'm Reverend Karen Fry, along with Dr. Petra and Reverend Vince. Just saw him a second ago, and Reverend Patty. We're grateful that you're here at CSLDallas, a Center for Spiritual Living, where we are radically inclusive, we are spiritually progressive, and we transform that lives. So if that doesn't sound like something you're in for, better get out right now.
A world that works for everyone and a life that works for me, these two things are intertwined in such an amazing way. We can't really tease them apart, can we? And so when we think about our topic for today, Suffer No More, it's really about moving beyond this notion that suffering is normal or okay or even acceptable. There's a wonderful phrase that is attributed to the Buddha. Most likely it comes actually out of the AA tradition. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. So I went to the dictionary and I looked up suffering because I thought, well, you always hear pain and suffering together, right? Like that's a sentence, pain and suffering. And I thought, well, okay, so what's the difference between pain and suffering? And the very first definition of suffering is pain. I thought, okay, that's not helpful. But the definition of suffering goes on then to say distress, misery, agony. Okay, so this is like pain on steroids. Yeah. And it goes on for a really long time. That's for me one of the things that for me suffering feels like it's something that just goes on and on. And there's a part of me that believes that it's inevitable. I wonder if I'm ever going to get out of it, if it's ever going to get better, and I'm not sure that there's anything that can be done about it. And those are the things that generate that feeling of agony and misery. Because you see, pain is inevitable. It is actually a natural part of life. When we're children, the pain of putting our hand too close to a hot stove and getting burnt, right, that's our body's red flag going, hey, hello, don't do that anymore. That is bad, right? Pain serves a purpose. And if we get too close and we start to feel pain and we snatch it back, we're okay. It's a red flag to tell us to pay attention. We can also experience emotional pain when we realize as a grown person that we didn't get the love that we wanted from our parents. Looking for love in all the wrong places, right? And we go out and we're looking for love outside of ourselves and the inevitable pain and disappointment, and we begin to tell ourselves a story about the suffering that relationships cause and all of that sort of stuff. And yet what that emotional pain is going, hello, you were taught some nonsense as a child. You did not get the love that you want. Hello, you need to do something about this. Do you see? It's a red flag telling us that something isn't right. And there's something that we need to or ought to do about it. The same thing happens in our collective experience, in our communities, in our cities, in our nations. When we experience righteous indignation over something that causes pain to ourselves or to people that we know and love and care about, or people that we don't know but can see the pain and the suffering that is being experienced. Right? This is, again, a red flag from our collective, from humanity, from people within this oneness that we're a part of going, wait, something isn't right. It turns into suffering when we believe that there's nothing we can do about it. When we believe that the suffering is inevitable, this ongoing agony, and that there isn't anything we can do. Ernest Holmes writes this: God never intended us to suffer. Suffering may be salutary in that it leads us to a place where we learn that it is unnecessary. We shall cease to suffer as we more and more comply with the laws of the universe. All suffering is the result of some infringement of these laws. some infringement of our understanding of how the universe works. Our understanding that we can, in fact, make a change. That just like the child can snatch its hand back and learn not to put its hand on the hot plate, we can also learn to stop looking for love outside of ourselves. We can learn to see it as the truth of our being. We can learn to experience it as the truth of life itself within us. We can look at the collective, at all of us, and we can say, wait, but we're one. We can see something new. And our self-help and our spiritual truths and our spiritual teachings and our affirmations, all of it teach us that suffering is no longer required. And actually, quite frankly, it's not acceptable anymore. It's not acceptable. It's not acceptable to fall into these places of depression and disappointment and that deep experience of, oh my gosh, will it ever change? If you want to change, if we want our lives to change, we have to start thinking about and focusing on and talking about what we do want. We have to turn our back forever on what we don't want. Ernest Holmes says this: the world is beginning to realize it has learned all it should through suffering and pain. Surely there can be no intelligence in the universe that wishes us to be sick, suffer pain, be unhappy, and then end in oblivion. Really? I mean, how is that right? How can we imagine that? Well, it was the will of God. The will of God is always for good, for life, for love, for joy, for hope, for harmony and beauty, and for the very expression of that love and life in, through, and as each one of us. There's no will for us to stumble and fall. But the reality of it is that we are human beings, and we do stumble and fall, don't we? We are spiritual beings, but we're expressing in and through this human life. And so our ability to look at the pain and acknowledge it and see it for what it is and learn from it allows us to experience pain without experiencing suffering. Do you see? Because now we're not caught in it. We're not stuck in it. It doesn't feel inevitable and doesn't feel like it's something we can't do anything about. And so we've reverted back from suffering simply into the ability and the willingness to acknowledge this is painful. This hurts. It hurts when somebody leaves us. It hurts when a relationship ends. It hurts when a job ends. It hurts when we look out at the climate and we wonder what's going to happen. It hurts when we see things in other cultures, in other countries, where children and women are treated poorly. It hurts. It hurts. And being able to see that and look at it and acknowledge it, and then ask, what is there to learn from it? What is there to draw out of it? Now, I have a mentor years and years ago, Reverend Virginia Seville. She used to say this. And for a long time, I had this tattooed on the inside of my eyelids. She said, you can learn just as much by being healthy, wealthy, and wise as you can by being sick, poor, and unhappy. So there, right? And I thought, yes, absolutely. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's true. It's just as frightening to be successful, isn't it? And to have things really work out. And I can be just as pushed in all of my limiting beliefs and false ideas through good things that happen. And those can be just as much opportunities to learn and grow. So the universe is constantly giving us opportunities for a brand new start, for a clean slate. If we start thinking newly, right in this moment, we'll have a different experience of our lives as it unfolds. So we affirm something different. We affirm a new truth. We affirm something other than the thing that we have been experiencing. Well, so my experience is that's really good in theory. Not maybe so easy in practice, is it? Right? Sometimes we're over here and it feels like we're not only in pain, but we're suffering. We're depressed. Life isn't working. The third relationship is broken up. We've lost the fourth job. Whatever it is. And now you want me to go over here and say, oh, life is beautiful. The universe supports me. I love it and I'm happy. I'm happy. I'm happy. And that can be a really big leap. So maybe I'm just confessing on myself. When I first started doing this walk, that felt like a really big leap to me. That was just too far of a distance. And so when I would try to go from where I was to that place over there, all of my disbelief, my yeah buts, and all of that shrunk me right back into the experience that I was having. And so somewhere along the line, I learned, or I began to practice this idea that if we could get from our negative experience into neutral, that from neutral to positive is a much shorter distance. If I could just get from negative to neutral, if I could stop being caught in that suffering and simply see the pain for what it is, simply call it out as what it is, and let it be exactly and precisely that. And by moving into that place of neutral, that gave me an opportunity to actually imagine that which I was seeking to affirm. Ernest Holmes says this: we can use this act of denial to create this process of moving from negative to neutral. Denial is the mental act of knowing that any negative condition need not be. Denial clears the way for the realization of truth. It is a wiping out of wrong reasoning. It is a clearing of the ground, a dredging of the mental channels, preparatory to the building of a positive, constructive affirmation. Now, do not stop with the denial. That is only the preliminary step. Deny the false and affirm the real. The need of denial ceases as thought rises to real spiritual perception. Well, sometimes I don't have real spiritual perception about the truth that I'm affirming. But where I can start is by saying, no, that is not the spiritual truth. I know at least that much. I know that that's not the spiritual truth. And I learned, and I've taught people for years now, that how the power of that spiritual universal denial that says, no, that is not the spiritual truth. That's not the spiritual truth about me. That's not the spiritual truth about the situation. That's not the spiritual truth about whatever it is, to be able to say no to it. That universal denial creates the space, brings us to a place of neutral. Emma Curtis Hopkins talks a lot about denials and affirmations and how denials carve out this space. And she quotes Thomas Carlyle, one of the poets, the Romantic poets, who speaks of the everlasting no, this constant no that the world is saying to us. No, you're not good enough. No, you can't have that. No, you're not as great as you think. All that no, no, no that we hear and see and feel and experience our whole life. And she reflects on his writings, and in one place, he has in his writings what she says, the stupendous no of his soul. And said to all evil, to all limiting belief, I am free. Now that's the no. Not the no, you can't do it, not that kind of no, but the universal no that says, no, this is not my truth. No, when I'm sitting in a doctor's office and the doctor says something, gives me a diagnosis, no, that's not my spiritual truth. When somebody judges or criticizes, no, that's not my spiritual truth. When somebody is discriminated against, when somebody behaves poorly, no, that's not the spiritual truth. Do you see, we deny in our minds that it has anything from spirit holding it in place. Now, we can not only say that to outside circumstances that are coming to us, we can say, no, that's not the spiritual truth. We can also say that to our own limited thinking, to our own false beliefs, to our own negativity and belittling self-talk. My mother used to always say, Petra, if your head was not attached to your shoulders, you would leave it behind. No, that is not my spiritual truth. I'm an organized being because there is order and organization in the universe. Thank you very much. No, that's not my spiritual truth. You're stupid, you're blah, 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 whatever, right? Whatever that belittling false thought. We can say that same universal no to that within us. So when I was, I was in my early 20s, and I was in this philosophy, really starting to live this philosophy, really starting to work it. I was still trying to figure out how to get from negative to positive. I was really working on this notion of neutral. If I could just say no to all this nonsense in my brain, I could make space for what they were trying to teach me about who I was and the life that I wanted and that I deserved. And so I spent a lot of time working with this. Now, my whole childhood, my whole growing up, all the way up until that time, I had the sort of typical chase dream. I would have these chase dreams, and I would run through the houses and through the forests and down the roads and around and around and around, and I would be chased by this very large, menacing, shapeless sort of form, dark thing that was constantly chasing me. And I knew that if I stumbled and fell, that it would fall upon me and I would cease to exist. And it was one of those nightmares, right? You wake up, your heart pounding, you don't want to go out to sleep because you don't want to go back into it. And I had these, and I'm sure they're from my childhood and whatever all that was. But the first lucid dream I ever had, I was in my early 20s, working on all of this stuff, and I remember the night that I had one of those chase dreams, and that big, dark thing, that huge whatever it was, chasing me down, and I was running for all that I was worth, running and running and running and running, and all of a sudden I thought, wait, no! I kid you not. And I turned in my dream and I said, no, there is no spiritual truth to you. There is no evil or darkness in God. You don't exist. Poofed. Disappeared. Never had that dream ever again. Ever. Yes. The universal no. Thank you, Jean. Right? That universal no. This is not my truth. That's the place that begins to open up the space for us to then ask, well, what is my truth? How can I see my life working? Or how can I imagine this world that works for everyone? Perhaps it's time for us to speak this universal no from our souls to end the suffering that we see outside of ourselves, that we see in the world around us. So there's this wonderful, she's a wonderful philosopher. She's a feminist philosopher. She's considered one of the greatest European 20th century feminist philosophers, and she was a French Catholic nun. Simone Weil. Simone Weil, she says, she asks the question, what is injustice? And she answers, it is the cry of a soul asking, why am I being hurt? Why am I being hurt? The cry of the soul saying, why am I being chased? The cry of the child, why am I being abused? The cry of the young woman being sold into slavery, happening today all around the world. Why am I being hurt? The cry of Gaia, why am I being hurt? Why are you desecrating the earth? Why am I being hurt? And you see, this cry, this is the cry of our own pain going, hello, are you paying attention? There's something going on here that's not okay. It's no different than when the child puts its hand by the hot stove, where we recognize all of a sudden that we didn't get love when we were children, and we're not going to find it outside of ourselves. What is injustice? It is the cry of a soul asking, why am I being hurt? You see, there's a powerful stream in Western philosophy, albeit an alternative stream, that suggests that when we talk about justice in terms of the healing of suffering, and we talk about justice, we tend to fall into a conversation about rights. It is a civil right, a human right. It is the right of every person. The problem with addressing it from the idea of rights is that you immediately have claims and counterclaims. Well, it's my right. Well, it's my right. Do you see? And that notion of rights means that somehow we're talking about the property of my being, or the property of my body, or the property of my life, as if it's something that can be bartered or bought and sold. Well, if I'll give you your right, if you give me mine. But do you see, Simone Weil, in this alternative stream of philosophy, says there's something much more important. Rather, we should listen to where injustice calls out for justice, for something to be done. We hear this call with our compassion, our listening to another's, to the anguish of another's soul. Jesus, when he saw the sick, the lame, the poor, the dead, he ministered to them. He didn't say, "How did you create this reality?" He didn't. He healed them. When he stood in front of Lazarus' tomb, he wept. He brought women, lepers, and tax collectors into his fold. And he said no to the Pharisees and the money changers in the temple. He said the universal no. This is not the spiritual truth. As I was researching all of this, I stumbled across William Faulkner's Nobel Prize winning speech when he was accepting his Nobel Prize for Literature in the early 1950s. Remember the McCarthy era that you've learned about, even if you didn't live through it. And in his speech, he says this: "I refuse to accept that man endures. I believe that man will not merely endure, he will prevail. He is immortal, not because he alone among creatures has an inexhaustible voice, but because he has a soul, a spirit capable of compassion and sacrifice and endurance." I refuse to accept this, he said. This refusal to accept suffering, literalness, to accept the fear of that era, the fear of the Cold War, of being blown up. We could translate that into the fear of today, the fear of terrorism, the fear of being blown away, the fear that is perpetuated in our culture. Here is a refusal to accept this fear anymore. This is a profound, universal no from the soul. In our wonderful book that we're reading, Sharif Abdullah, he writes this: "If you are not motivated to change, you are not paying attention. We no longer have the luxury of acting as though the mess was someone else's problem or responsibility. No one escapes the effects of the society that we live in. If you leave the work of change to others, they may either do nothing or simply replicate the problem in another form. But if each of us adopts the attitude, change begins with me, we will be able to create the consciousness, the compassion, and the action for this fundamental change." Now, he goes on to say something that I found absolutely fascinating when he was talking about this story of our culture. And because William Faulkner was writing in the time of communism and the McCarthy era, and he talks about, he calls it the auto-totality, the totalitarian state on autopilot. As Viktor Havel says in The Power of Powerlessness, our world today is marked by auto-totality. Auto-totality is like a totalitarian system, not unlike the monarchist, fascist, or communist systems with which we are familiar. Auto-totality is not created or kept in place by military force or secret police or any conspiracy theory. It is not maintained by a ruthless ruler or elite using intimidation, coercion, and carefully calibrated rewards and punishments. It is kept in place by me. It is kept in place by you. It is created by all of us. Collectively, our millions of actions every day create, support, reinforce, and maintain a system where no one is free. Auto-totality is totalitarianism on autopilot. Suffering, the belief that nothing can be done, that it's inevitable, and that there's nothing I can do. Do you see? And so our willingness and our ability to take responsibility, to decide, to engage, to say no. Ernest Holmes says this: no matter what the false condition may be, it must be refuted. The proper kind of a denial is based on the recognition that in reality there is no such limitation. It must be refuted. We must say no to the unthinking, unconscious social habits and patterns, just as we say no to those in our own minds. The master teacher Jesus, he said, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Sharif Abdullah now goes on. He talks about stories of culture and how they play out. And he identifies 3 key stories. So I just want to take a moment to look at these 3 key stories he talks about in our culture. The first key story is the story of the keeper. The keeper is the traditionalist, our indigenous people, those folks who have the idea of preserving and conserving and taking care of and maintaining the way it's been. There's a deep connection with keeping the past and keeping things the way that they have been. There's a deep connection, a sacred connection, and a deep connection with the earth. The keepers, however, this is not a romanticized, let's go back to pre-technology or some, romantic ideal of the past. The keeper is limited to a clan or tribe or certain area of land. Now, modernity has given us the breaker culture. The breaker culture is the culture that says, well, it's about a life that works for me. That's what it's about. My life, my needs, what I need, and now I'm going to control whatever I need to so that my life will work. And I'll control you, and I'll control the economy, and I'll control the planet, and I'll control whatever it needs, whatever is needed to control so that I can have my life work. And he calls it the breaker society because it's breaking down. And breakdown and breakthrough are happening everywhere. But if we continually perpetuate the story of the breaker society, we'll just continue to cycle and circulate. So he invites us into what he calls the mender story. The mender story takes the values of the keepers, preservation, close to the earth, recognition of the importance of our connection and our culture and our history, and brings it forward into a global society, a global country, a global perspective, not just the country, but the planet as a whole. The mender story is we are all one, and there is enough for each of us. Now he says, what's our place in all of this? What's our part of this? Our role is to be both hospice and midwife. Both hospice and midwife. We have to hospice the breaker story by saying no to its excess. And we have to midwife the keeper values, affirming sacredness, connection, and spiritual truth to create a sustainable, creative, emerging new story for our planet as a whole. Now, you see, this dovetails beautifully with Simone's idea that it's not about rights or about equal rights. It's actually about our moral obligation to each other as part of the one. It's to pay attention to injustice, to pay attention when some part of us is waving the red flag saying, why am I being hurt? And to seek a justice that is rooted in active compassion and love. Do you see? That's a very different place. It allows us to open our hearts to hear each other's pain and to affirm that it doesn't have to be suffering. What does that mean? It doesn't have to be inevitable. It doesn't have to go on forever. And yes, actually, there are things that we can do about this. And it means that it's for all of us. We are all one, and there is enough for all. That means nobody gets left out. Do you see, in this battle for rights, in this posturing for rights, there's an inevitable notion that, well, if you get your rights, what about mine? And we have this claim and counterclaim. And when we move, and what happens in the battle of rights is that there is this notion of, I'm going to force it on you. I'm going to force you to respect my rights. And yet, from this place of compassion and love, there's a profound place of power, spiritual and personal power, that says, but we are one. And wherever there is pain, there's an opportunity for me to hear and listen, be aware, not fall in the hole, be aware, and to affirm that there is spiritual truth, that there is another story, a new way. Now, just like in our own lives, do you see that shift from the way it's been to this new story? You all heard the Global Vision last week, and how many of you were like, well, that's a nice idea. Not sure I can imagine that. And that's an honest thing. There are pieces of that. I'm not sure I can imagine that. Well, how's that going to work? Well, so in many cases, what we may need to go is get from negative to neutral. It may be too far a distance from negative to this affirmative way that we can't yet imagine. So we need to go from negative to neutral. And we use to get from negative to neutral, we use the universal denial. No, this is not the spiritual truth. No, it's not the spiritual truth that gay people can't marry. No, it's not the spiritual truth that black lives don't matter. No, it's not the spiritual truth that you can rape and pillage the earth. No. This is not the spiritual truth. This is not how we behave if we are all one and we truly believe that there is enough for all of us. You see, then that universal no comes from a profound place of love and compassion. And how do we make this shift? At least let's get to neutral. And then we can see how our imagination can lead us forward. So we're going to invite the greeters to come forward. They have a handout they're going to give you. As you know, in this last year, we were talking about in our pledge program that we have 3 initiatives for this year. And one of our initiatives for this year is Initiative for Diversity. So we're just going to invite the greeters to pass this out. And our diversity for 2016, Bert and Tracy and Karen and I have been spending a lot of time with a lot of people, talking to a lot of people. Our diversity initiative for 2016 is to help get to neutral by saying the universal no to racism. To say, no, this is no longer acceptable, and we no longer accept that this suffering is inevitable. Now, this is simply something that we've chosen here at CSLDallas to do. That doesn't mean we're requiring you to do it. Doesn't mean that we're requiring each and every person to say, this is your initiative for 2016. You might decide you want to say no in the realm of feminism or in the realm of poverty or hunger or homelessness. You might decide that you want to say no in terms of climate change or whatever the issue is that speaks to your soul, where you feel your compassion is tapped into. So this year at CSLDallas, we're saying no to racism, to move to that place of neutral. See, our vision is the affirmation. We live in a world where love, peace, and harmony is the norm for relationships between and among people from different racial identity groups. We exemplify oneness, not sameness. That's the vision. And there are ways and times and places where that's hard to imagine, isn't it? And so we seek to move to neutral, to promote the emergence of an active collective consciousness that reflects a worldview in which equality, respect, and justice are experienced equally by all persons without regard to their race or the color of their skin. And so our goal is to awaken and inspire people from all identity groups to say no to racism, to use this deep spiritual practice of denial to learn how to move out of suffering and to have that compassion for each other and to say no more to this suffering so that we can begin to see how we can do this in other places if we truly believe in a world that works for everyone. So there's some strategies that we're looking at, seeing how they are going to unfold. We have no idea. If you want to play with us, please see me or Karen or Bert or Tracy. We are already engaging with other places around Dallas. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. So we're looking with other communities and organizations who are doing amazing things. And so you'll see on the back our first sort of partnership with this program called Every Voice 2016. There's information on the back to which you are invited. We are co-sponsoring this event with Chris Crass as the speaker. Tracy Brown will be the speaker and do the workshop in April. Reverend Karen and I will be participating in April, and then there'll be 2 more throughout the year. For those of us for whom this particular issue or topic is the place where our compassion is opened. So we invite you to participate. Now, one of the things that we seek to do with this initiative is to reach beyond the normal folks who are already on board with this. Okay, we want to stop preaching to the choir. To people who are already, we actually need to find ways to bridge the gap with whom those people, this actually feels fearful and frightening to begin to bridge those gaps and find new ways of telling this story. Sharif Abdullah has this amazing story in his book about doing these workshops all over the country and the need to find the people in the center, in the middle. People on the 2 extreme ends, they already know where they stand. It's those of us who are in the center, who are in the middle, who actually think life is okay, who are in denial of the breaker story, rather than using the universal denial to say that's not our spiritual truth. We're going to find a new way of being. So all of us have to be included. Every single person has to be included in this, including those people who don't feel marginalized. Everybody is included. We all know that the ship is sinking in so many different ways. So everyone has to find a way to be included in saving the world. Sharif Abdullah says something, I thought it was so great. He said, stop talking about saving the world. Start talking about save your own butt and the world will get saved along the way. Yeah, because we are in this together. And what affects one of us affects all of us. Charles Fillmore says this. He's the founder of the Unity movement. He says, do not be afraid to pour your love upon all the so-called evil or limited thinking in the world. Deny the appearance of evil and affirm the omnipotence and the omnipresence of love and goodness. For our own life to truly work, it has to work in the context of a world that works for everyone, focusing on the spiritual truth of each and every person. And stand up with the no, the universal no from your soul every time you see it being denied. Yes, let us affirm and know that we have learned all we need to and all we can from suffering. The time to give it up is now. We say no to racism and every ism that causes separation and therefore suffering. In so doing, we change everyone's life, creating a world that works for everyone. And this makes room, truly, for a life that works for me. Let us pray. Let us pour our love over life. Feel that love and compassion. Let us feel it pour from our hearts lifting us, sustaining us, creating that space within ourselves of compassion, where we say, yes, we are all one, and there is enough for all.
We let the love wash over us. We let it be. We let the love wash over us. We let it be. Now let your consciousness expand out from this room into the Metroplex. We let the love wash over us. We let it be. Now expand out to the borders of the state. We let the love wash over us. We let it be. Now let your consciousness expand out to the entire continent so that all within it are right here in your moment right now. We let the peace wash over us. We let the peace wash over us. We let it be. All over the world, we let the peace wash over us. We let it be. We let the peace wash over us. Wash over us. We let it be. We let it be. We let the grace wash over the entire planet. We let it be. We let the grace wash over us. Wash over us. We let it be. We let it be. We let the grace wash over us. We let the grace wash over us.